You don't belong in first class. Stand up before I have you escorted off this airplane." Claire Donovan's voice cracked through the quiet cabin with the confidence of someone who had never imagined she could be wrong. Heads turned instantly. Champagne glasses paused halfway to waiting hands. Conversations dissolved into silence. Seat 1A, moments earlier just another premium seat on Meridian Crown Flight 271 from Atlanta to San Francisco, had suddenly become the center of every eye on board. The woman sitting there never raised her voice. Dr. Simone Whitaker looked up from the slim leather folder resting on her lap, her expression calm, almost curious, as though she had heard those words somewhere long before this flight ever existed. She wore a charcoal sweater, dark jeans, comfortable walking shoes, and a silver watch that carried no recognizable luxury logo. There was no designer handbag, no assistant standing nearby, no visible sign that she belonged to the executive class most passengers expected to see behind the curtain separating first class from the rest of the aircraft. Claire folded her arms tighter. "I said the seat isn't yours." Simone slowly lifted her boarding pass. "Seat 1A, she answered quietly. "That's what my ticket says." Claire barely glanced at it before looking back at Simone's face instead of the document in her hand. Anyone can print paper. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks, but no one spoke. The engines outside continued their steady hum while the aircraft remained connected to the jet bridge. Somewhere beyond the windows, baggage carts rolled across the tarmac, completely unaware that the next several minutes would ripple far beyond this airplane. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Simone Whitaker. Claire stepped closer until she blocked the aisle completely. "There's a priority passenger arriving any minute. Economy is through that curtain." Simone didn't move. She looked once toward the empty seat beside her, then back at Claire. "Are you reassigning my seat because of my ticket?" she asked. "Or because of what you think I look like?" The question lingered in the cabin longer than anyone expected. Claire's jaw tightened. "Don't make this difficult." Simone rested her boarding pass on her lap. She had boarded early using her real name. The scanner had flashed green. Every document had matched perfectly. Nothing about this moment should have been happening. Yet she had spent enough years building companies to recognize when a decision stopped being about policy and started becoming about prejudice disguised as procedure. Across the aisle, an older woman lowered the business magazine she had been reading. 3 rows behind them, a young trainee flight attendant quietly watched the exchange without saying a word. Near the front galley, the captain glanced toward the commotion but remained out of sight. Claire leaned forward one final time, speaking loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "People like you always think confidence can buy access. It can't." Simone folded her hands together, completely composed. She neither argued nor apologized. Instead, she studied every face around her, every reaction, every hesitation, every opportunity someone had to choose fairness over assumption. No one aboard Meridian Crown Flight 271 realized they had already begun taking the most expensive test in the airline's history, and no one, not Claire Donovan, not the flight crew, not the passengers quietly pretending not to watch, had the slightest idea that before Simone Whitaker's name was spoken aloud, one phone call would bring an entire aviation network to a standstill. Simone Whitaker had boarded the aircraft exactly the way she intended to. No chauffeur had walked her through the terminal. No executive assistant had cleared a path. No security team had announced her arrival. She had checked one small carry-on bag, accepted a simple paper boarding pass, and stood in the same boarding line as every other passenger. It had been nearly 18 months since Altura Global Aviation completed its acquisition of Meridian Crown Airlines, and this was the first unannounced field evaluation she had personally conducted since becoming chief executive officer. Quarterly reports could measure revenue. Surveys could estimate customer satisfaction. Compliance presentations could promise cultural change. None of those documents could answer the question that mattered most. How did employees behave when they believed no one important was watching? That answer could only be found at 30,000 feet, inside ordinary moments where assumptions quietly replaced policy. Simone had designed the initiative herself. It carried an internal name known only to a handful of senior executives. Meridian Reset. Every division would eventually face an unannounced ethics review. Customer service, flight operations, airport management, corporate offices. The purpose was never to trap employees. It was to discover whether respect remained intact when status symbols disappeared. She had deliberately left her tailored business suits inside her closet. Her wedding ring stayed at home. The luxury watch she usually wore during board meetings remained inside a safe. Today she wanted every decision made about her to rest on nothing except her face, her voice, and the boarding pass she legally purchased under her own name. At the gate, the boarding scanner had flashed a bright green confirmation. The gate agent had smiled politely and wished her a pleasant flight. Everything had worked exactly as designed. Then she stepped into the first-class cabin. Within less than 2 minutes, the atmosphere changed completely. One assumption erased every verified record that existed inside the system. Simone had witnessed versions of this moment before. 23 years earlier, her mother had purchased business-class seats after saving money for nearly 2 years. A flight attendant had questioned whether they belonged there before eventually admitting an error without offering an apology. Simone never forgot the expression on her mother's face. It was not anger. It was disappointment. She had quietly told her daughter, "Never chase respect. Build something so strong that disrespect exposes itself." Those words stayed with Simone through law school, through her first startup, through failed negotiations, through billion-dollar acquisitions, and now into the leadership of one of the largest aviation companies in the country. Across the aisle, the young trainee flight attendant continued watching in silence. Her identification badge read Samantha Reed. She looked uncertain, as though something she had just witnessed did not match the procedures she had learned during training. Claire noticed Samantha looking toward seat 1 Alpha and immediately gave her a sharp look that sent her back toward the galley without a word. Simone noticed that exchange. She noticed everything. Every glance. Every hesitation. Every opportunity someone chose comfort instead of integrity. Then Claire reached into her uniform pocket, removed a company tablet, and tapped rapidly across the screen. Seconds later, her expression hardened into a satisfied smile before she looked directly at Simone and said, "Interesting. According to the system, seat 1 Alpha is no longer assigned to you." Simone slowly lifted her eyes from the boarding pass resting in her hands to the glowing tablet screen, and for the very first time since boarding the aircraft, she realized someone had not simply questioned her presence. Someone had just changed the record itself. Claire Donovan held the tablet with the confidence of someone who believed a glowing screen could never be questioned. She turned it just enough for the passengers nearest the aisle to see a single line displayed in bold letters. Seat 1 Alpha. Reassigned. She smiled as though the matter had already been settled. "There it is," she said. "The system agrees with me." Simone Whitaker looked at the screen without changing her expression. She knew exactly what the system had shown less than 5 minutes earlier because she had watched the boarding scanner verify her reservation in real time. Airline databases did not rewrite themselves. Someone had made a choice. The question was no longer whether bias existed. The question was how far people would go to protect it once challenged. Claire tapped the screen again before speaking louder for the surrounding passengers to hear. "I need you to gather your belongings and move to economy before we delay this flight." Simone folded her boarding pass carefully and placed it inside her leather folder. "I will gladly cooperate with any legitimate company policy," she replied. "But I will not cooperate with a false record." The cabin became even quieter. A businessman sitting across the aisle slowly lowered his laptop. An older couple exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody wanted to become involved, yet nobody could pretend they were not listening anymore. Claire pressed a call button mounted beside the galley entrance. Less than a minute later, Captain Ethan Cole stepped into the first-class cabin, wearing his Navy uniform and composed expression. Claire immediately addressed him before Simone could say a single word. "Captain, we have a passenger refusing crew instructions after attempting to occupy a seat that is no longer assigned to her." Ethan barely looked at Simone before turning toward Claire. "Has the reservation been updated?" Claire held up the tablet. "It already has." Ethan nodded once, accepting the explanation without requesting verification from operations, without checking the original boarding record, and without asking to see Simone's ticket. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I need you to comply with crew instructions so we can depart on schedule." Simone met his eyes. "Captain, did you personally verify the change?" Ethan hesitated for only a fraction of a second before answering. My crew has already done that. It was enough for Simone. Every decision was building its own timeline now. Every assumption connected itself to the next one like links in a chain. Near the galley, Samantha Reed quietly picked up another company tablet that had been left charging during boarding. She activated the display and searched the passenger manifest. Her eyes widened almost immediately. She looked from the screen to Simone, then back to Claire's tablet. The two displays were not showing the same information. Samantha swallowed hard. During training, she had been taught that every reservation update created a permanent electronic history. Records could be changed, but they could never disappear without leaving a trace. She took one cautious step forward before Claire noticed her movement. Samantha, Claire called sharply, return to your assigned duties. Samantha stopped instantly, but she did not put the tablet away. She stared at it as if trying to understand something impossible. At that exact moment, another alert quietly appeared across her screen, displaying the precise time the reservation had been modified. The timestamp was less than 60 seconds old. Samantha Reed could not take her eyes off the timestamp glowing on the tablet. The reservation had not disappeared because of a system failure. It had been modified after Dr. Simone Whitaker boarded the aircraft. Company policy required every change to include an authorization code, a recorded reason, and a permanent audit trail. Samantha had studied those procedures during weeks of training. They existed to protect both passengers and employees. Yet what she was seeing on the screen did not match what Claire Donovan had just claimed in front of the cabin. Samantha took another careful step toward the captain. Captain Cole, she said quietly, I think there may be a discrepancy in the manifest. Claire turned immediately, her smile disappearing. There is no discrepancy, she interrupted. Return to the galley. Samantha hesitated. But the update was entered less than a minute ago. Claire's eyes narrowed. That is enough. Ethan Cole looked from Samantha to Claire, then made a decision that settled heavily over the cabin. Follow your supervisor's instructions, he said. Samantha slowly lowered the tablet, but she did not close the screen. Simone noticed every second of the exchange. Truth had just knocked softly on the door, and authority had chosen not to answer. Across the aisle, a tall man wearing a navy sports jacket finally stood. Excuse me, he said calmly. My name is Darius Bennett. I boarded behind this lady. I watched the gate scanner accept her boarding pass without any problem. If her ticket was valid 5 minutes ago, maybe somebody should explain why it suddenly is not. Claire answered without looking at him. Sir, please remain seated. This does not concern you. Darius folded his arms. It concerns every passenger when company records change after boarding. A quiet murmur spread through the first-class cabin. An older woman seated in one Charlie slowly removed her reading glasses. Helen Brooks had spent nearly 4 decades practicing employment law before retiring. She had learned that facts rarely disappeared all at once. They disappeared one small decision at a time. She looked directly at Claire. Young lady, if the record changed after the passenger sat down, then someone made that change. Who authorized it? Claire avoided the question completely. Instead, she looked toward the front of the aircraft and pressed another call button. Airport security needs to meet this flight, she said firmly. We have an uncooperative passenger delaying departure. Simone remained perfectly still. She did not interrupt. She did not defend herself. She simply watched as each decision drifted farther away from company policy and closer to something no handbook could justify. Samantha quietly opened the audit history one more time. Beneath the new reservation status appeared another line she had not noticed before. It displayed the employee identification number responsible for the modification. Samantha's breathing slowed. She recognized the number immediately because it belonged to someone standing only a few feet away. Before she could say a single word, Claire reached toward the tablet and said, Hand that to me. Right now. Claire Donovan extended her hand toward Samantha Reed without taking her eyes off Simone Whitaker. Give me the tablet, she said in a voice that left no room for discussion. Samantha looked down at the glowing screen one last time. The employee identification number attached to the reservation change matched Claire's credentials exactly. It was impossible to misunderstand what she was seeing. The record had not been corrected. It had been rewritten. Samantha swallowed hard before locking the screen instead of surrendering it. I think corporate operations should review this first, she said carefully. Claire's expression froze. You are a trainee, she replied. You are not here to question management. Ethan Cole stepped between them, trying to restore control over a cabin that had grown unusually silent. Everyone needs to calm down, he said. We are going to resolve this professionally. Simone finally spoke again, her voice steady enough that several passengers leaned closer just to hear it. Captain, professionalism begins with preserving evidence, not hiding it. Ethan hesitated, but only briefly. Ma'am, I need you to step into the jet bridge while we sort this out. Simone looked out the window toward the terminal, then back at him. I have no intention of interfering with your work, she answered. I also have no intention of surrendering my lawful seat because someone altered company records after I boarded. Helen Brooks slowly stood from seat 1 Charlie. Captain, she said, I practiced employment law for 38 years. If that electronic record was changed after boarding, you have a compliance issue, not a passenger issue. Darius Bennett nodded in agreement. Nobody here has seen this woman raise her voice. The only thing escalating is the behavior of your crew. Claire folded her arms as though none of the comments mattered. This conversation is over. She reached toward Simone's boarding pass resting inside the leather folder and lifted it before anyone could react. Holding it between 2 fingers, she glanced at it for less than a second before tearing it cleanly down the middle. Small pieces of heavy paper drifted onto the carpet beside seat 1 Alpha. A sharp gasp moved through the cabin. Simone watched the torn boarding pass fall without changing her expression. The sound of ripping paper carried her back more than 2 decades to another airport, another flight, another quiet humiliation. She remembered standing beside her mother as an airline employee insisted there had been a mistake, despite valid tickets and confirmed seats. Her mother had gathered the documents without arguing. Later that evening, she had told Simone, never waste your strength proving you belong. Build a future where the truth speaks before you do. Those words echoed with remarkable clarity now. Simone bent down, picked up 1/2 of the torn boarding pass, and carefully placed it back inside her folder. Then she looked directly at Claire. You still have time to correct this, she said calmly. Restore the original record. Acknowledge what happened. Let this flight depart with dignity. Claire laughed softly. Or what? Simone held her gaze without blinking. Or the consequences will become much larger than this cabin. Before anyone could respond, the aircraft door opened again, and a uniformed airport security supervisor stepped onto the plane carrying a tablet that displayed Simone Whitaker's name. The airport security supervisor paused just inside the aircraft door and studied the tablet in his hands before looking toward Claire Donovan. I received a request regarding a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions, he said evenly. Claire stepped forward before anyone else could speak. That is correct. She occupied a seat that is no longer assigned to her and is delaying departure. The supervisor nodded politely, then turned toward Simone Whitaker. Ma'am, may I please confirm your identification? Simone reached into her leather folder and calmly handed him her driver's license. He compared the name to the information displayed on his tablet. His expression remained professional, but his eyes lingered for a moment longer than before. Thank you, he said, returning the identification. Everything matches the boarding record that was transmitted to airport security. Claire frowned. The reservation changed. Samantha Reed instinctively looked down at the tablet she still held. The supervisor answered without raising his voice. Airport security receives a time-stamped copy of the passenger manifest immediately after boarding is completed. The copy currently in our system still lists Dr. Simone Whitaker in seat 1 Alpha. Silence settled over the cabin once again. Ethan Cole looked toward Claire. How is that possible? Claire forced a quick smile. The update must not have synchronized yet. Samantha quietly spoke before fear could stop her. Captain, the synchronization is automatic. It cannot take place without creating an audit record. Helen Brooks folded her magazine and placed it neatly inside the seat pocket. Which means there are now 2 different versions of the same reservation. Darius Bennett added. And only one of them existed before this confrontation started. Claire's confidence began to crack around the edges, but she refused to step back. This passenger has been disruptive from the moment she boarded. Simone finally stood, smoothing the front of her charcoal sweater with calm, deliberate movements. She looked first at the supervisor, then at Ethan, and finally at Claire. No, she said quietly. The disruption began the moment someone decided that my appearance mattered more than the facts. Nobody interrupted her. Even the engines outside seemed distant now. Simone removed her phone from her pocket for the first time since boarding. She unlocked the screen, scrolled to a single contact, and rested her thumb over the call button. Claire crossed her arms again. Calling your attorney is not going to change anything. Simone almost smiled. I am not calling an attorney. She pressed the button and lifted the phone to her ear. The call connected before the first ring had completely finished. Olivia, Simone said in the same calm tone she had used throughout the entire encounter. This is Simone. Meridian Reset has reached its final evaluation. A composed voice answered immediately. Understood, Dr. Whitaker. What is your assessment? Simone glanced around the cabin one last time, taking in the torn boarding pass, Samantha holding the evidence tablet, Helen standing beside her seat, Darius watching quietly, Claire refusing to acknowledge the truth, and Ethan realizing the situation was slipping beyond his control. Then she delivered a single sentence without emotion. The airline has failed the live ethics threshold. Activate sovereign hold across the entire network. There was a brief pause before Olivia answered with complete certainty. Confirmed. Executing sovereign hold now. At that exact moment, somewhere far beyond the aircraft, computer monitors inside Meridian Crown's operations center began changing from green to red. Inside Meridian Crown's network operations center in Dallas, dozens of large display walls changed almost simultaneously. Green departure indicators flashed amber. Amber shifted to red. Dispatch supervisors looked at one another in confusion as a priority authorization banner spread across every operational screen. Sovereign hold activated. Executive authorization verified. Flight releases suspended pending executive review. One controller reached for the hotline connecting flight operations to executive headquarters. Another refreshed the scheduling dashboard, only to watch every outbound clearance disappear one after another. Fuel release requests stopped processing. Gate departure approvals froze in place. Maintenance dispatch queues locked automatically. Across airports from Seattle to Miami, from Boston to Phoenix, aircraft that had been minutes away from departure remained parked exactly where they were. Back inside Flight 271, nobody knew any of that yet. Claire Donovan folded her arms with forced confidence. Nice performance, she said. Whoever you just called cannot change airline policy. Simone Whitaker slipped her phone back into her pocket without responding. She had spent years learning that genuine authority never needed to announce itself twice. Captain Ethan Cole's company phone suddenly vibrated against his belt. He glanced at the display, frowned, and answered immediately. Captain Cole speaking. The color slowly drained from his face as he listened. What do you mean every departure has been suspended? The first-class cabin became perfectly still. Claire turned toward him. Captain. Ethan did not answer her. His attention remained fixed on the voice coming through the speaker. No, there must be some mistake. We are fully boarded and ready for pushback. A pause followed. Then another. Finally, he whispered, Understood. He lowered the phone without saying another word. At nearly the same moment, the airport security supervisor's tablet emitted a sharp notification tone. He looked down. A crimson banner covered the screen. Executive operational hold. Preserve all evidence. Do not alter passenger records. Await corporate response team. Samantha Reed unlocked her tablet again. The audit history she had protected only moments earlier now displayed a small gold shield beside the reservation log, indicating that every modification had been permanently preserved for executive investigation. Nothing could be deleted now. Nothing could be rewritten. Helen Brooks quietly smiled to herself. Someone at headquarters moves very quickly, she observed. Darius Bennett looked toward Simone with growing curiosity. Who exactly are you? Simone remained silent. She simply watched as Claire reached for her own company tablet. The confident expression that had carried her through the entire confrontation disappeared almost instantly. Every management function on her device had been disabled. Employee access suspended pending review. Claire tapped the screen repeatedly, convinced it had malfunctioned. This is impossible, she whispered. Before anyone could respond, the public address speakers inside the aircraft chimed softly. Instead of the usual departure announcement, a calm corporate voice filled the cabin. Attention Meridian Crown flight crew. Do not continue boarding procedures. A corporate executive response team is now en route to your aircraft. Please preserve all electronic devices and await further instruction. Claire slowly looked back at Simone, and for the first time since this confrontation began, uncertainty replaced certainty in her eyes. Simone met her gaze with the same calm expression she had worn from the beginning before saying quietly, "You believe this was about one seat." It never was. It was about whether this airline deserved the trust people place in it every single day. Just then the aircraft door opened once more, and 3 executives wearing Meridian Crown headquarters identification badges stepped aboard, led by a woman who stopped the moment she saw Simone and addressed her with unmistakable respect. "Good afternoon, Dr. Whitaker. The network has been secured exactly as you instructed." The woman leading the corporate executive response team stopped beside seat 1 Alpha and placed a hand over the identification badge hanging from her jacket. "Dr. Whitaker," she said respectfully, "I am Olivia Mercer, Executive Vice President of Corporate Operations. Sovereign hold has been fully executed. 152 departures have been suspended. Every operational record has been preserved. Estimated protected revenue currently under executive review is $2.1 billion. The words settled over the cabin like complete silence. Claire Donovan stared at Olivia, then at Simone, then back again, searching for some sign that this had to be a misunderstanding. "Dr. Whitaker," she repeated quietly. Olivia looked at her with calm professionalism. "Dr. Simone Whitaker is the Chief Executive Officer of Altura Global Aviation, the parent company of Meridian Crown Airlines." Nobody spoke. Captain Ethan Cole slowly removed his company tablet from the cockpit side pocket and unlocked it. A crimson notification filled the display before any other application could load. "Executive investigation initiated. Flight crew administrative access revoked pending review." Claire hurriedly unlocked her own device again. The message had not changed. Every management privilege had disappeared. Scheduling authority, passenger management, crew reporting, all unavailable. Samantha Reed looked down at the tablet she still held. Unlike the others, hers remained active. Another notification appeared across the audit log. "Evidence custodian assigned. Preserve all records until released by executive compliance." Helen Brooks quietly nodded as though every unanswered question during the last 20 minutes had finally reached the same conclusion. Darius Bennett looked toward Simone with quiet admiration. "You never told anyone who you were," he said. Simone answered gently, "Because none of you should have needed my title to treat me with dignity." Olivia stepped forward and accepted the torn boarding pass Simone had carefully placed inside her leather folder. She examined both pieces before handing them to another executive standing beside her. "Photograph these immediately," she instructed. "Include them with the reservation audit history and the boarding records from the gate scanner." Samantha carefully handed over the protected tablet. "The modification occurred after boarding," she explained. "The audit trail identifies the employee credentials used to change the reservation." Olivia acknowledged her with a grateful nod. "Thank you for protecting the record." Claire finally found her voice. "This was only about one seat," she said weakly. Simone looked directly at her. "No. It stopped being about a seat the moment verified facts were replaced with assumptions. Then assumptions became altered records, and altered records became official decisions." Ethan lowered his eyes. He understood every opportunity he had ignored. He could have verified the manifest. He could have questioned the reservation change. He could have listened to Samantha before dismissing her concerns. Instead, he had trusted authority without examining the evidence. Olivia turned toward the crew with measured composure. Effective immediately, Captain Ethan Cole, Flight Attendant Supervisor Claire Donovan, and every employee directly involved in today's incident are relieved of operational duty pending a full ethics and compliance investigation. Your system credentials remain suspended. Corporate representatives will conduct individual interviews before any further determination is made. No one argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Every electronic record, every witness, every timestamp, and every decision now pointed in exactly the same direction. Simone remained standing beside seat 1 Alpha, calm as she had been from the beginning. She had not raised her voice once. She had simply allowed every choice to reveal itself. Then Olivia's phone vibrated with a new priority update. She read the message once before looking back at Simone. "Dr. Whitaker," she said carefully. The board of directors has unanimously requested that you address the entire airline before sovereign hold is lifted. Olivia Mercer read the message from the board of directors one final time before placing her phone back into her jacket pocket. Every executive standing behind her waited for Simone Whitaker to speak. Every passenger in first class waited as well. Outside the aircraft windows, baggage carts had stopped moving. Ground crews stood beside service vehicles checking handheld devices that all displayed the same instruction. Hold position. Across the country, 152 departures remained suspended, not because of weather, not because of a mechanical emergency, but because one airline had just discovered that integrity could not be separated from safety. Simone slowly looked around the cabin. She recognized fear on some faces, embarrassment on others, and quiet reflection on many more. Finally, she turned toward Olivia. Inform the board that sovereign hold remains in effect until every preserved record has been secured and every witness statement has been protected. After that, operations may resume. Olivia nodded immediately. Yes, Dr. Whitaker. She relayed the instruction within seconds. A confirmation arrived almost instantly. Evidence preservation complete. Network restoration authorized. One by one, operation centers around the country watched red indicators return to amber, then green. Aircraft waiting at gates received new departure clearances. Fuel releases resumed. Gate agents reopened boarding doors. Dispatch teams returned to work. The airline was moving again, but it would never operate exactly the same way. Simone then faced Samantha Reed. You chose honesty when it carried personal risk, she said. That decision protected this company more than any executive policy ever could. Samantha lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. I only followed the truth. Simone smiled gently. That is exactly why leaders noticed you today. Olivia made a note on her tablet before speaking. Effective immediately, Samantha Reed is reassigned to corporate ethics and service excellence, pinning her acceptance. Samantha looked speechless. Across the aisle, Helen Brooks quietly applauded once. Darius Bennett joined her. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin rose to its feet, not in celebration of power, but in recognition of principle. Claire Donovan remained silent. Captain Ethan Cole stood beside her with the same quiet reflection. Neither tried to defend the decisions that had brought everyone to this moment. Simone looked at them without anger. People often believe discrimination begins with hatred, she said calmly. Most of the time it begins with certainty. Certainty that appearance tells the whole story. Certainty that questions are unnecessary. Certainty that authority is always correct. Those assumptions cost this airline far more than delayed flights ever could. She picked up the two halves of her torn boarding pass and placed them together on the armrest of seat 1 Alpha. The tear remained visible even after the pieces touched. Some things can be repaired, she continued. Others should remain visible so we remember why they happened. Olivia informed the cabin that the ethics investigation would continue independently and that every preserved record would be reviewed before final employment decisions were made. No applause followed that announcement because accountability did not need applause. It only needed honesty. Simone collected her leather folder and finally looked once more at seat 1 Alpha. She did not sit down. She no longer needed to. The seat had never been the victory. As she walked toward the aircraft door, passengers stepped aside with quiet respect. No one asked for photographs. No one requested introductions. They simply understood. Long after the flight eventually departed, people would remember that one ordinary afternoon when an airline paused its entire network because one woman refused to surrender her dignity. They would remember that real leadership does not shout to prove its strength. It quietly raises the standard until everyone else must decide whether they are willing to rise with it.